Hi, my name is Natasha Braier. I'm an Argentinian cinematographer based in Los Angeles. I was very happy to discover OLED TV because before that I only had projectors at home. And so when I discovered OLED TV with the filmmaker mode, it's kind of like the first time that I'm seeing something on a TV and I like it. It's almost like being on set and having a professional monitor that costs like $30,000. And the OLED TV looks pretty much the same as my professional monitors. So now is the first time that I have TV at home. So one of my favorite movies is Tarkovsky's The Mirror. And I love this movie. It's basically like a spiritual experience and it's very immersive. And I only watched it on the cinema and only recently watched it on the OLED TV because I felt like I could give it a go and it could be an immersive experience like how it was on the cinema. And it was great because I have a big TV. It really felt organic and cinematic and it had the right texture there. Another movie I really loved that it really was a huge influence for me was Double Life of Veronique by Kieslowski. And it's a movie that has very strong colors. It's kind of like a very expressionistic cinematography. This is also a movie that you probably don't want to watch on a TV because you think everything is going to get too kind of filter on the same color. But again, I think it looks great on an OLED TV because it survives as long as it's on filmmaker's mode. Another movie I really love is I Am Cuba. It's also a very cinematic experience and you need to see it on a big screen, but I think it really holds on the big OLED TV for sure. And a movie I really love also that was very important for me when I started was Mauvais, The Night is Young by Léo Carax. It's a French movie. The cinematography was by Jean-Yves Coffier, who was one of my favorite cinematographers. And it's got this amazing soft lighting, but very contrasty, that could also get lost on a TV that doesn't have all the gamma to show all these nuances of the soft light. But on the filmmaker's setting, it just translates beautifully. I love the filmmaker mode. It's the best. It's what is the most close for me to watch something how I used to watch them in a projector, or if I was at work, you know, with my high-end monitors watching something. So in a way, what I'm doing lately is I'm trying to have one of the OLED TVs on filmmaker modes in the post-production house so that I'm seeing everything in the very high-end professional monitors, but I'm also seeing it on the OLED TV on filmmaker mode, so I can see how the normal audience is going to see it. So I think it's a really good way to do it because if I only do it in the professional setting, then of course nobody's going to see it like that. So like this, I'm kind of aiming at my my ideal viewer that is watching at home but loves cinema. So this customer makes sure that they're getting like a good TV to watch movies properly, and I'm calibrating for that. It's very difficult because all the TVs are different and people have different TVs and people watch movies in their TVs in different conditions. So you're never gonna be able to go to anyone's home and control how they watch. But my philosophy is, the people that love to watch movies and they really care about watching them as best as possible, they are going to have this TV and they're going to set it on filmmaker mode. So I'm aiming to make sure that when they're doing that, they get the best experience. We were shooting in the north of England in November, so it was very cold and it was raining a lot and we had a lot of wind. So we were really fighting with all the elements, which in a way it really reflects what the album is about. So it felt very organic. It felt like the perfect place to do that album. I think the most challenging was salt water and boat because we had Ed inside the water in the ocean. And we actually thought that the challenge was going to be Ed not being able to stay there for too long because the water was really freezing. But actually, he was great. He stayed for hours in the water. Our main problem was actually the tides, because we had very big equipment. We had to get a techno crane there in the sand. And obviously, the techno crane only has some length of the arm, and the idea was to go from a wide shot to a close shot. But of course, we couldn't really park the techno crane too close to the water because the sand is too thin, too wet, and then you could never take the crane out. And the tides change very quickly there. So you also have to calculate that it's going to take you time to take it out. So we had the crane kind of far away enough from the water to make it safe. But then we started losing the tides very quickly, so the tide would recede, and then the crane would not go in close enough to Ed. So the tides ended up being our biggest challenge, and also the rain, because it rained a lot, so many times we had to stop because the rain was too strong. But Ed was like totally cold resistant, to our surprise. He was there for hours. And she said we really were trying to be very invisible with the camera and not call attention to the cinematography. It really had to feel like very documentary, and that there was no filmmakers there because of the nature of the story, especially because the office at the New York Times, it's full of little cubicles and glass, so it was inviting for that. But we also felt that it was a good visual metaphor for our characters always being trapped, you know, and sometimes not just at the New York's office, but when you're shooting, and we're shooting some of the survivors, they're always kind of boxed and trapped somewhere, because until the moment where they were able to talk with the reporters and where everything came out, they were really trapped on their story. And I think once they get to express their story and they let their voice out, that's why the movie is called She Said, it's kind of like they get liberated from that. So visually we wanted to hint very subtly to that somehow these women are still trapped when they're talking, and then through the conversation the layers start to come out, and then we get closer and closer to them, and we're on them, and we don't see them anymore in these kind of boxes. We wanted to, again, be very invisible and not dramatic, and we just wanted to suggest. So we basically set up a dolly shot that we felt had the right speed to be very subtle, and then we went to different hotels and we repeated the same movement with the camera on the same height, with the same lens, and at the same speed, just to try to show that the repetition, that it could be those 4 corridors that we have in the movie, but it could be also hundreds or thousands of corridors, because it's not only this story, this story is just one example of obviously thousands or millions of stories in the world. So we just wanted to show this kind of repetition and variation. It's a little bit like the Impressionist, like Monet paintings, you know, when you have the same landscape in different times of the year. It's kind of a little bit the same, you know. There's a lot of corridors. Every corridor has a lot of doors, so there's a lot of stories like this one, in a way. It kind of represents the metaphor of the movie, right? It was really interesting to adapt the movie to a completely different setup, and I think, in a way, the original movie, it's very centered on Pauline's performance, but I think the city is not so much a protagonist, and I think in Gloria Bell, the city of LA became more of a protagonist. Maybe because Sebastian and I are both foreigners looking at the city and kind of including it as part of the story, or maybe just because this is such a beautiful city that you can't avoid to photograph it as well. But I think that was the new thing that Gloria Bell brought to the remake, in a way. That's what is different, you know. And our approach in terms of the lighting, I was also trying to do something very nostalgic in a way, like to portray LA and the light of LA and the magic and the color of the city, but at the same time, I feel like she's in a moment of life where she's not the protagonist of her own life, right? She's always kind of like, she could always be the secondary character in the story, but we're following the story of this woman that is not the protagonist. And it's like this feeling of, you know, aging and being like in a moment that is very hard for a woman, especially being alone. And I don't know, I just felt this kind of nostalgia about kind of like the last chance at life, right? Even though, of course, Julianne Moore is so beautiful and she looks amazing. She is kind of like a little bit too beautiful for the role. So I think I had to somehow help with the lighting this idea of like life is kind of behind, right? So we worked a lot with the light of LA and the sun and the strong sun and the colors and the warmth, but she's always not in the sun. Like if it was a different movie, the protagonist would be always getting the light or the place in the frame that has more light, like she would be taking it. And in this movie, there's always like some strong sun, some strong flare, some strong, beautiful warmth that is happening, but she's always in the shadow. She's never really getting hit by the sun in the day scenes. When she goes out at night, there's a bit more hope. There's this kind of like, okay, hopefully things are gonna change, I'm gonna meet somebody. And so the nights have more color, she gets more light, the spotlight is a bit more on her. And they still have this kind of romantic, nostalgic colors that we base more like in all Polaroids, and maybe, you know, like what photos from LA in the 70s, you know, would have looked, which would have been the time where she was super young and having fun and all that stuff. So subliminally, we're trying to convey all this state of mind of this character. So every scene was like a great adventure to me, where I was like, I don't know, like almost for the first time in my career, like completely free to experiment and not worry too much about the result. Like I had a permission to fail, but an explicit request to really push the boundaries and push myself. And then if it was too much, we'll take the time to bring it back. And that was extremely liberating. I guess I get that sometimes in music videos, because as a format is of course more poetic and allows more for this. But on films, even though I tend to work with very experimental directors, you still have certain parameters and you have a story and you cannot go completely wild and crazy. But Nicolas really allowed me to do this in Neon Demon, and I think that's why, you know, we got the movie that we got. I think maybe I really love the fashion catwalk scene, just because it's like a really good example of what you can do without having anything on a low budget movie, because we didn't really have the money to produce an amazing catwalk show. And so we had to work with the minimum stuff. And it's really literally like smoke and mirrors. Just a few mirrors, just a bit of smoke, and just a couple of lights with color in a dark background, in a black set. And still works and still tells the story that it needs to tell. But yeah, we work with very low levels of light and also very intense colors. We use a lot of purple and turquoise, so we had very, very little light, and we were playing at the bottom of the really edge of the camera. But I did this trick. I have a DIT called Ernesto Joven, and we have this trick that we actually call it the trick, but in Spanish we call it the trampa. And basically what we do is like he kind of sets up the monitors in a way that I see everything a bit darker than what the camera is seeing. So when I'm on set, I can light very, very dark, and I can see in the monitor exactly how I want it to look. But actually, in the negative, what you would call the negative in the old times, there is a little bit more detail. So by doing this, we make sure that the blacks are not going to get milky. and that in post with the light that we're applying, we're just making everything a little bit darker, so they're getting like a nice consistency. I like to work on films that are making me very excited. And so the first step to get excited is that I get excited about the story, and that I feel that it's a story that needs to be told, that somehow is going to contribute to making a better world, or making people somehow transform and heal and be better. So I gravitate towards those stories. And then, of course, if that first touches me and resonates with me, then I really care about the director and, you know, what's the director's point of view and from where they position themselves to tell this story. If we do resonate with that, then I'm very excited to go in this journey with the director and tell this story with them. My dream would be that everyone that buys a TV like really reads the instruction manual and makes sure that they set it up for the optimal way of making films. We spend so many months of our life taking care of every frame, right? And making sure that we create the best cinematography for the best viewing experience. The dream would be that you have a technician that goes to everyone's home and helps everyone to set up their TV so that they can have the optimal experience of seeing the results of our hard work and see the best cinematography they can see. Obviously, this is not possible, but I'm hoping that with the filmmaker's mode, it's going to be very clear for people when they get the TV and they're going through the menus, that hopefully they're going to say, okay, I should be watching on this setting, and they will just leave it like that. And I think that will help, that the viewing experience is a lot closer to what the filmmakers intended. I think we need to normalize this somehow. And actually, I'm in the board of governors at the ASC, at the American Society of Cinematographers, and we've been working on these things for a long time, like just trying to find a standard that could be for all TVs in the world, and that could help us to feel like the work that we do gets translated and people get to see it as close as possible as it was intended. It's very hard to actually get a standard, a worldwide standard for this. But I think, you know, things like this TV, like creating this filmmaker mode and naming it like that is hopefully going to make people realize quickly, like, this is the setting that they should always keep in their TV if they like to watch movies, and just don't touch it.